Hi, I'm Sue Dunce. I'm been in the village for umpteen years. My family have been in the village and lived in the same spot where I am now for just over 100 years. We were predominantly farming, and I just love the village. Just seen a lot of changes over the years, massive changes.
So you said you grew up on a farm.
Mm-hmm.
So that farm, was it near the quarry? Am I
No,
right? No.
The farm at the top of Northway,
Right.
not far from the garage. It's about we're the last sort of house before you start going onto the common, just before Copley.
On the left-hand side. Yeah. So what was the farm called?
Rye Ground.
Oh, Rye Ground. Do you know what the name of the farm?
Obviously, I think predominantly there's a lot of rye grown there, and next door is rye lands. So yeah, but when my grandparents first came and bought the farm, apparently it used to belong to the Vivians. It was a hunting.
Was it a
sort of
lodge?
Estate, hunting lodge. I mean, there used to be deer apparently on there. It was covered in oak trees, so they had to clear all the oak trees before they could actually start farming. Hard task in those days when they only had shire horses and had to hand push the ploughs, no tractors.
Such hard work, isn't it?
It was hard work.
So do you remember what was farmed?
A lot of crops, hay, vegetables, potatoes, carrots, swedes. We had horses, shire horses, no sheep, cows, pigs and chickens mainly.
Where did you take the crops then? So some was for family, was it? And then
family, and some were to be sold. Yeah.
Was that in the market?
In the market. Yeah.
So how often? Once, twice, three?
Once a week, if I can remember rightly. Yeah.
So you'd take the crops. So what time period is this? In the 19?
They bought the farm about 1920. So yeah.
Okay. So what were the names?
Barrow. And we've still got Broadley Farm is Keith and Janet Barrow, so they're cousins. Yes.
Okay.
It's like a family affair.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
A farm of families.
What about Joyce then?
Joyce, no. My cousin that's next door, her grandparents, which was a daughter of my grandparents, when they got married, they had a house, the bungalow built in one of the fields, and it's always been owned by the same family. That they went down to the son, and that was my cousin, and now my other cousin has bought it, and she's living there as well.
So that's 100 years of family use of the same area. So you've seen a lot of change.
Yeah.
Dramatic change, would you say? A
lot of dramatic change in the village with the building that's gone on. Lots of new housing estates like Withy Park, and Eastlands, a lot of building.
So you mentioned the shire horses, so there would be different pathways, different trackways, and land was more accessible, I would imagine, by foot. So now to get through the village, most people use cars. So the noise must have changed considerably.
A lot, really, because I mean, I can remember going to school, walking to school at 5 years old. I didn't have anybody to take me. I just went on my own. I went and I came back on my own. So although the road was there, there wasn't the traffic on there, obviously, as there is now.
But that was the question I was going to ask with regards to school. So your parents, where would they have gone to school?
My father went to Bryn Mill and he had to pay to go to school. My mother, when she came down here, she probably Bryn Mill as well, I would have thought, because that was sort of one of the nearest schools. My mother's father and my cousin's father were two brothers. My mother's mother died when she was very young, and so in those days the father couldn't look after them, so they had 7 children, which was split up amongst all the relatives. So, of course, my mother's uncle was down here, so she came to live down here at 11 years old, and so she met my father as well through the family, sort of all related in some way or other. Yeah.
So you walked to school, and you went to Bishopston School?
Went to Bishopston School, yes.
In the valley?
No.
No?
My foster brother, I had a foster brother, he went to school in the valley, and he always says he can remember bringing the chairs up from the school and some of the bits and pieces when they built the new school.
Oh.
So he can remember bringing things up from there and taking them up to the new school.
Oh, can he?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And Mr. Jones, that he used to be in the old school down the bottom by the church, and he came up to the new school as well.
Do you remember if he was happy in the old school?
He never said he wasn't.
No.
And the Gritton was their playground, the river, the bridge. They were quite happy playing.
So you went to what is now Bishopston School. How's that changed?
I suppose educationally it's changed a lot, but teacher-wise, classroom-wise, it's more or less stayed the same, I think.
So would there have been a lot of farming families in the school?
A lot. I mean, I was just saying to Clive, the village predominantly was all farms, market gardens. Everybody was scratching a living from the ground. Very few people had what I called proper jobs. Everybody was just earning a living from the ground.
Tight community then.
Very tight community, as well as a lot of people meeting people and getting married in the community. They didn't really sort of go outside of the community.
So it was a very tight community. Families would meet and marry, and there was a shared caring environment, people looking out for each other.
Very much so. I mean, as children, if you were told by somebody else that you were to do something, you do it, because they just looked out for you. You go to somebody's for tea, they'd look after you. Yeah, it was a very caring community.
So you said you were scratching a living, so it would be very hard subsistence level. So everybody growing a variation, maybe certain crops, so that if one failed, another would practically speaking, and food and just earning a living, would you share produce, or would there be an exchange of produce?
I think they shared, yes, and probably exchanged as well.
Yeah.
Because there were different, I mean, some people did root vegetables, crops. I mean, there was the lava bread down there, so you had access to that as well. Yeah,
I'm trying to understand. It would make sense, wouldn't it, in a tight community? So if everybody was growing the same thing, but if everybody grew different things and shared to an extent, or sold amongst the community, so there was an expectation, well, that you're growing that, so... Because
some places grew, say for example, perhaps we could grow carrots better than somebody that could grow carrots down here, so then you would do a swap or do an exchange. Yeah. And going back to sharing in the community, I mentioned Broadley Farm. When my uncle was farming there, I think he was one of the first farmers to have a baler. That made life much easier for everybody. So he used to go round all the farms doing the hay, and everybody probably would go around with them, and everybody would help do the baling, fetch it in, have food.
Yeah. So can you describe the farm that you grew up in? The day, any standout memories?
Yes, I always remember one. I wanted to invite a friend round for tea, and they were quite a bit posher than us. I remember my mother getting my father to paint all the farm buildings before she came for tea, because it was a very small farm, and it was very basic, so it wasn't. There weren't a lot of proper brick-built buildings as we know it.
Did you mind?
No, not at all. No, we had the most fantastic childhood. I think every child should be born on a farm. I think it's lovely because it teaches them everything really, how to grow, how to be in a community, how to be social. You live with life and death. You had your pet lambs, but you knew they were going to go slaughter. You had a tear or two, but you just got on with it. Just got on with life.
So I imagine the life as being very close to nature. I think that's possibly why I imagine you walking, it being quieter, and being able to hear more of the wildlife, see more of the wildlife around you.
Yeah.
Would you say that was
I would say that's true.
True.
Apparently my cousin used to say there were lots of curlews, things that were common then but not now, because the habitat has changed so much.
Yes.
Curlews are in danger now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, which is
Lapwings,
sad.
peewits.
Yeah, peewits again. Yeah. I mean, we consider ourselves lucky now. We can still hear the cuckoo and the woodpeckers, but I don't think everybody can.
So is that because you back on the common land?
Probably,
common land?
yeah. And probably because there's nothing on that land that's, like we mentioned, glyphosate spraying and things like that. That farm has not had anything like that. It's always been pure, either lime or manured. So it's not had anything that's been detrimental to the land.
So would you say that's so that's over 100 years? So that's obviously a family, that's how you farm, and it's entrenched in your approach?
I would say yes.
Is that an understanding that's passed down because you respect that might not be good for the land, or?
And I just think it was using what resources were available at the time. I don't think that there weren't the weed killers, the glyphosates and everything available then like there are now. And I think when you're farming on a smaller scale, the pressure perhaps is not on as much to produce such vast quantities to feed more people as it is now.
So would you rotate the crops?
Yes.
And then that allows the soil
to rest
and recover.
It's hard work. It's hard work growing things and trying to get the people to do it. And if you can't afford the machinery that makes life easier to do it, you just can't.
Yeah.
There was Gower growers, wasn't there?
Yes. I don't know if they're still in operation. I don't know.
No. I worked for them every summer, really, picking cauliflowers, and perhaps it became too big before the structure was there. I don't really know.
I remember Reg, he did have a contract with Tesco's once, but they only wanted the cauliflowers a certain shape, certain size.
Yeah.
They had to cut all the green off it. They had to go out very early in the morning because if there was frost forecast, they had to go and cut them early. If there was frost on them, they couldn't cut them, they had to wait. In the end, it was more work, more hassle than if we were just growing them naturally, as they do now. I think they still grow some cauliflowers now and sell in the shop.
There are organic farms and CSAs, community-based agricultural enterprises on Gower now. So would you see those as a positive way forward?
Yeah, I think so, probably, yes. I wish they wouldn't put so many perhaps restrictions on farmers. I mean, the Welsh government at the moment is pressing for the farmers to give up 10% of their land to grow trees. That's not feasible, I don't think, because if you've got to grow food, 10% of your land, I mean, we didn't have a very big farm. If we had 10% had to grow over to trees, it wouldn't be worth farming.
Yeah. Yes.
And I know we lose certain wildlife, like curlews, whatever, but wildlife, I think, does adapt itself to new conditions where it has to.
I suppose those wildlife corridors are important, aren't they? Certainly in Bishopston we are still connected by fields and common land.
We are, yeah.
So that's a good thing.
We are lucky.
Very good thing. So looking at the LiDAR, you can see the strips of fields also. So farming obviously goes back a long way.
A long time, I think. Yeah. Common has just gone wild now.
Right.
Because years ago it used to be grazed because every farm had commoners' rights that were on backing onto a common, and you were allowed, according to the size of your farm, you were allowed to graze so many sheep, so many cows, so many horses, so many pigs, so many ducks and geese.
Ah, I didn't realise it was proportionate to the size of the farm.
So you could, so it was grazed quite well and it kept everything down. But now, as you can see, I mean, it's just, there's no grazing on there are some cows, some horses, but not to the extent that it was. So it's not grazed and it's left to grow really wild, and I don't know if that's a good thing to happen in itself.
Conservation grazing can certainly be valuable, can't it? There are incentives to do that, and they are grazing on through crosses on Fowler Common. I suppose the hazard then is the road.
Very much, yeah.
For the animals.
Then the reason farmers have stopped grazing land, is it legislation, traffic, farms packing in, or is it a mixture?
It's a mixture of everything, I think, Clive, I don't think, I mean, Keith in Broadley, he was farming, he's got a lot of sheep, and he was farming, he was doing milk, dairy, but that wasn't viable, so I think he's gone over to beef. So when you get farmers altering things, it does alter the dynamics of everything. And what you do.
I mean, how many dairy farms? We have Kittle Hill.
Got Kettle.
Dairy.
And I don't really know. Then you've got to go down to Gower, I think, haven't you, before you start getting into dairy
So
farms.
dairy's just not really viable anymore?
No. But then again, it might change.
Yeah.
Because what people want, it might change again.
So there, yes, of course, so change in public demand and the perception of milk that's locally produced. There is a shift, isn't there, with some people towards having locally grown produce because it's better for the environment.
Less travelling.
Better for the animals. Better all round. But of course there are these restrictions and now demands, 10% as you say.
It's a lot.
So as that changes, and of course growth in that area would be slow, you've got these additional demands, so it just makes it difficult again, doesn't it?
Definitely.
When was the biggest change, would you say, in terms of this becoming less agricultural, for want of a better word, or having all of the
I think it's been gradual, really, because
not dramatic.
Not so instantly dramatic, because you start getting places like Withy Park being developed, so that's only like one area, and then it's built and you get used to it, and you get used to the people, and the people get used to what is around. Then you get another development like Eastlands, and then perhaps Northlands, and then before you know it, all of a sudden you've lost a lot of fields and you've got a lot of development and a lot more pressure on the area.
Were there seasonal celebratory events, community gatherings, get-togethers?
Harvest time,
Harvest.
definitely. I remember harvest. Easter used to be quite sort of celebratory thing. Christmas, obviously.
Any traditional?
Summertime, especially when you were cutting hay.
Yes.
And as before we had the use of the baler, you used to have to have it cut, you used to turn it manually to dry it and then collect it. And everybody used to come and help. That was lovely.
So in terms of family relaxing, were there holidays?
Only with my mother, because my father couldn't come because he was tied to the farm.
Yeah.
So it was only much later on, when he was sort of semi-retired, we were able to go away as a family. But we didn't have what they have now. You get in a plane and go somewhere. It was more like a camping holiday, a caravan holiday. And even that wasn't luxurious because you didn't have inside toilets or anything like that they've got now. But it
it was fantastic. I just remember just having a lovely time. You're making friends with people, talking to people, just so lovely. The freedom
I can't.
to have.
Freedom, close to nature.
Yeah.
Hard, but possibly less open-voiced resentment for the ways of.
Yeah.
Because certainly family pressures and work that we have now, you constantly hear in the schoolyard that voiced exhaustion, the
Yes.
rushing here, rushing there.
I mean, we weren't tired years ago, and the older people that worked must have been tired as well, because if you wanted to put a screw in, you had to do it manually. You didn't have electric screwdrivers and all the help that you've got now. But everybody seems to be more stressed and more tired now with all the equipment they've got than what we had years ago when everything was manual. It was a different exhaustion.
Yes.
It was more physical, but I think everybody's mental health was on an even keel then. You were all in the same
Interesting,
boat.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It is interesting because there's that physical tired feeling at the end of a long day that is very different to psychological stress from being concerned perhaps or maybe being constantly available on phone, I don't know.
And as children, nothing was, if there was something important to discuss with the adults, then it was never discussed in front of children, really. Children were children, they were allowed to be children. There wasn't pressure on them to be so grown up, I think, as there is now. Too early. And yet, saying that, we used to when we went to school, we finished education unless you were going on to college at 14 or 15. You left school on the Friday, you started work on the Monday, full-time job. And maybe you'd have been playing with dolls and cars and things up until about 12 years old. And then all of a sudden at 14, 15, you were out in the big wide world working, doing what I call a proper job. You know, in an office, manual work.
Yes, big jump.
Big jump. But it was the norm.
Very different perhaps for women and men.
Very much. When I went to college, did a commercial course, I went to the office to get a job, and I can remember I just got engaged, and the boss that was interviewing me hadn't mentioned anything about being married or anything, so I thought I'd better tell him I am engaged, I am going to get married, because they didn't really like employing women that were going to do that, because as soon as they get married they knew you'd get pregnant, and once you got pregnant you gave up work. And it was a big investment to employ somebody, teach them the ways, whatever office you were in, and then just to give it all up. But mind, I was quite happy when I was pregnant and I knew I had to give up work. I was quite happy knowing I'd be at home and looking after the little ones, so it didn't make any difference to me. But all that has changed. That's massive changes.
Huge change. Well, thank you, Sue.
Oh, right, it's okay.